Good morning and welcome to the show. IB Countdown to Kickoff is up and rolling along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. How are you today, Mr. D'Addario?
I'm fantastic. I will say, and this is not a popular opinion, but I am a fan of the green jerseys. I've been looking forward.
Just going to get it right out there. Huh?
I'm just throwing it out there. I've been looking forward to this game for a long time. Obviously, there's a lot more writing on it now than there ever was, that I ever thought that there would be. But it's game day Saturday. We only get 12 guaranteed game day Saturdays. And so I'm going to revel in it, and I'm going to be excited about it.
And hopefully we have a good one sooner than later.
That's right. I would love to be in a good mood at the end of today. That would be fantastic because that has not been the case for the past two games. So I would love to be on a post-game show with a smile on my face. Let's put it that way.
That's what I did not see the start of your post-game show last week, but I heard I think I saw some comments that you guys looked pretty down when that show started.
I mean, there wasn't much to be happy about.
No, I know. Trust me, I know. I was sitting right next to you. I know.
Man, I tell you what.
How long did it take you guys to get out of the parking lot, by the way, into your homes so that you can do the show after the game?
About 20 minutes. It wasn't too bad.
Really? Did you beat most of the traffic getting out of there?
It's kind of an easy out from where I'm.
That's
parked,
true.
so.
Where we park in that, because you park in the Ignition parking lot too, right? Yeah, I think they've got all the media over there. Yeah. That's very true, and that spot is actually, for me, getting in very convenient. It's fairly convenient getting out as well. So it's a little bit of a hike, but
it's about a 10-minute walk. I mean,
yeah, you get your steps in.
It's not too bad, you pass a few tailgates, grab a few beverages and some food on the way. You see somebody, hey, I'll take that. That sounds good, and then head on in. I mean, it really works out well.
Vigo is in rare form. I see already asking if I had toast with peanut butter and jelly for breakfast today. Vigo among the Steve Angeli fans.
Oh boy,
I see.
The most popular player on the roster.
He is
quarterback, baby. That's how
he
it works.
is. What happens
talking about Steve Angeli 2 weeks ago?
What happens if it ends up Steve Angeli becomes the guy? Then is Ron Paulus III the most popular guy after that if things don't go right? I mean, I don't know.
Number 3.
I don't know. Let's not go there. Let's not go there right now. But glad to have everybody with us, all the live viewers here this morning as we get ready for Notre Dame and Cal today, California. And I will say I am a fan of green jerseys. I don't know that I necessarily like these green jerseys.
And that's fair.
We can save that for later for rapid fire if you want, but I'm not I don't like the blue on green. I'll just say that. I love the look of the white names on the back, the white lettering on the back. I think it would look very crisp and clean if the numbers were in that same white.
Yes. I was not anticipating the names on the back. That's kind of a new twist to the whole thing. And maybe they're just like, you know what, we're done with these green jerseys. We'll just put the names on the back, give them to the guys, and we'll have a new iteration of green jerseys at some point. So that would be nice.
Yep. And Stymie Snurdly, after Marshall, I'm not feeling the green today is what he says. And I was kind of actually thinking the same thing because I was just looking at my notes. Oh yeah, Marshall wore green last week.
Different shade. Different shade of green. But
that's right. That's right. As we get going here, do us a favor, just smash that like button if you would, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We much appreciate it. We've got a lot we're going to get to. We're going to, look back on some of the stuff against Marshall. We're going to look forward to Cal later on in the show. We'll make some predictions on some other games from around the country this weekend and, see what else we can find. Sean and Vince, before we know it, there will be cries for Mishawaka great Justin Fisher. That is very true, says Robbie. I saw Justin. I didn't get to get up close to him, but I saw him with the Mishawaka coaches after the game last night, watching his brother Brady run the offense. Brady didn't get to the end zone. He almost did. He had a long run. Justin's younger brother playing quarterback for Mishawaka. He got run down by a Plymouth safety at about the 15-yard line, I think it was, before he could get to the end zone.
He's going to hear it from Big Brother, I would imagine.
That's right.
For that one, yeah.
I saw Justin. He was out there on the field wearing a gold Notre Dame shirt afterwards.
Got to rep it.
At Steel Stadium. That's right.
Gotta
That's
rep
right.
it. His tight end days might be might be over here soon. We'll see.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows what's going to
Oh,
happen at
that's
this point?
hilarious.
Well, they lost 26-21 to Marshall last week. The Irish did. And we, of course, have spent all week breaking it down. We have come to the end of the cycle as this is where we officially flush Marshall out of our systems, I think, now
Yes.
as we get to, countdown to kickoff on game day for Cal. Biggest thing we learned last week outside the Buckner injury to start with is what, Vince?
Man, I learned that the valleys are deeper than I thought they could be, to be honest with you. Like
Yeah.
that, I didn't learn anything positive about the team itself. It was kind of the same team that we saw against Ohio State. A lot of similar mistakes that were made that were really not corrected from week 1 to week 2, which was a little bit disappointing to me. But me along with everybody else that doesn't live anywhere near the Marshall campus did not expect Notre Dame to lose this game, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
who knew that was what was going to happen? So the valley is lower than I thought it could be. I think we learn a lot about this team going into week 3 now from what we saw in week 2. And there's going to be a lot to learn. So hopefully it's positive learning. That's the goal here. But yeah, it was rough.
The valley is low. Is the river deep? I guess we will find that out here soon enough. And I just really disappointed with what we have seen from these two lines for Notre Dame so far,
Yes.
offensive
Yeah.
line and defensive line. That's the biggest thing to me because again, there's so much you can write off when you're playing the number 2 team in the country
Absolutely.
2 weeks ago. And again, I think everyone, even though disappointed that they were so close and could have won that game had a couple things gone the other way, you're still feeling pretty good coming out of that, I think,
Right.
going up at Ohio State and all that stuff. But that all evaporated last week at Notre Dame Stadium, and especially seeing the way these two lines played, just very, very disappointing. And I saw just this morning, apparently the Marshall offensive line coach has left. I have not seen a reason why, like what's going on there. And there was a joke that somebody made about, well, maybe he's going to Notre Dame to take over for Harry Hiestand since he had the better offensive line between the two last week.
He did. There's no doubt about that. He
Yes.
definitely did. So
I still have faith in Harry.
me too.
I don't understand based on some things we saw in training camp and knowing Harry Hiestand's history and the talent that he has with this group. I'm really dumbfounded to figure out why this line has struggled the way that it has so far.
Oh, I completely agree. And, Harry's track record speaks for itself. I don't take back anything that we said about Harry Hiestand in the summertime and during the recruiting season and leading up to the season, because I still believe all of that. I do. I believe all of that. I'm disappointed in the outcome of the first 2 games from the offensive line, no doubt about it. But I absolutely still have faith in Harry, and I think that he's got a lot of bad habits to break. And again, I didn't think it would take this long, but in the long run, I still think he's the right man for the job. There's no doubt about that.
And it seems like communication stuff is still the biggest issue, I
Absolutely.
think. Communication and stuff between the ears more than necessarily physical. That could be a factor today, and we'll touch on that coming up here in a little bit when we talk specifically about this matchup. But bigger picture, the bigger story, obviously, coming out of last week is the loss of Tyler Buckner.
Yes.
Gone for the season. It's the non-throwing shoulder, but he had to have surgery this week, and Marcus Freeman doesn't expect him to be recovered until sometime in mid-January, basically when winter workouts start. So no Tyler Buckner for the rest of the season. And I know there are some people who wanted to see Drew Pine to begin with, and Buckner obviously had not played exceptionally, the first couple of games. How big a loss do you think this is for the big picture?
Well, I mean, it's a huge loss. Obviously, we at Irish Breakdown, consider Tyler Buckner a championship level quarterback, or at least we believe he can get to that point. And you've lost your first 2 games, so Notre Dame isn't competing for a championship anymore. Unless, chaos ensues in college football. Notre Dame's not playing for a championship. So does that necessarily, what does that mean for the rest of the season? We'll see. But, the offense is going to look different with Drew Pine. We saw flashes of Tyler Buckner, in the run game and, some of the things that he was able to do. Drew Pine is a different quarterback. And I think people need to understand that as well. It's not going to look the same. This offense is going to look a lot more like the Cone offense,
right,
as opposed to the Tyler Buckner offense, right? So, look, it's in the playbook. We know what it looks like. Is Drew Pine more mobile than Cone was? Of course. So, I mean, there is that. This offensive line is better than last year. So, I mean, there is that as well. But the wide receivers are going to have to get involved in order for this offense to click. And the run game needs to get involved. Drew Pine can't be a one-man band. He needs the run game. And if they can't have it all, this is going to be a very, very long season. It's not going to be Drew Pine's fault.
Got to have the run game and or an extension of some short passes. Like, really, we've talked a lot about Chris Tyree. And again, that's something that we'll talk about more in detail in a little bit. But the other part of this is whether it's Tyree or Chris Tyree has 3 catches. He's got the only 3 catches by the running backs so far. Right. And this was an offense that last year relied on, not relied on, but used the running backs as a big part of the passing game. Kyron Williams had I think it was 42 last year, and Tyree had 25, 30 himself last year. Those two combined, and they're not doing that right now. And some of the pass rush things that Notre Dame has had to deal with as an offense, you can negate some of that if you're willing, to the screen passes to the running back, short stuff to the run, and it was just, it hasn't been a part of the offense so far. I think it's going to have to be now that you've got Drew Pine. I'm really curious to see what Tommy Rees does with this offense. I mean, do you basically just go back to the midseason Jack Cohn offense, post Virginia Tech, where you decided, okay, now it's time to go tempo, and not just have him stand back there in the pocket and try to, again, negate some of the rush and some of the offensive line issues and get the offensive line going that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think tempo would be a good thing for this team. I think getting, Chris Tyree specifically involved, like you mentioned, is a great idea that 80,000 people thought would be a great idea last week. And apparently others did not. So hopefully that comes to fruition. And then you've got to get your wide receivers involved. And if that means getting Tobias Merriweather on the field, then you need to do it. They need the wide receivers have just not been targeted enough or at all, frankly, in this offense. And that's a huge problem as well. So
I want to address this comment real quick from JS Sports 2012. He says, ridiculous to think Buckner is a championship level quarterback. You made me lose all respect for your judgment and knowledge. I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion, but I do think it's important to remember that Tyler Buckner played in a handful of games last year in small packages after not playing high school football for 2 years because of the pandemic, and he was still in the early stages of becoming a college quarterback. And I go back to the conversation that I had with Chase Brown, who covers Ohio State. A year ago at this time, not everyone was sold on that quarterback over there at Ohio State.
Good point.
They didn't. There were a lot of questions about whether or not he's the man. And now all of a sudden, a year later, he comes into the season as a Heisman Trophy favorite after throwing 44 touchdown passes last season. I'm not saying Tyler Buckner was going to go on to that. I think athletically and from a skill standpoint, there was every reason to believe that he could be a championship quarterback. The biggest thing, again, it's more between the ears because you could see the way that, there were reads that he was missing. There were, they did a lot more check with me stuff to the sideline with the plays from the line of scrimmage. And I think that's because, get to the line of scrimmage, let the coaches see what was out there on the field defensively, and then let them kind of help make some of those calls because obviously Tyler Buckner was not quite there yet. So from a skill and athletic standpoint, and again, you can talk about his delivery and his mechanics and all that stuff. He's got the arm, he's got legs, he's got speed. There are a lot of good things. He was still a quarterback who needed to grow more in terms of the college game and just see things and get that experience. And that to me is the biggest thing that both Tyler Buchner and Notre Dame are going to lose out of this is a season of experience that regardless of what ended up happening from a win and loss standpoint this season, Tyler Buchner is going to lose a year of experience. And now the quarterback situation for the future becomes a lot more in question.
Well, no, absolutely. And the fact that he went out with an injury, the people that had negative thoughts about Tyler Buchner, they're going to continue to have those until game 1 of next year.
Yeah.
And it's just going to build and build and build. And, regardless of what Drew Pine does, they're still going to have those negative thoughts on Tyler Buchner. I still hold my opinion about who Tyler Buchner is and who he could be. And I'm not going to change that. And if people don't like it, that's fine. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. That's totally fine. You can have respect or you can not have respect or you can watch a different channel. That's cool too. I mean, that's not going to hurt my feelings any. But the bottom line is I've watched football for a very, very long time and analyzed it and seen good and seen bad and all these other things. And you need to take into account the fact that this is basically his redshirt freshman year.
Right.
And this is his first year as a starter. Everybody talks about what a great you mentioned CJ Stroud, right? He was a freshman last year. He was a redshirt freshman last year.
Right.
Okay. So, Tyler Buchner had
and he threw 3 interceptions in the first, he threw an interception a game, the first 3 games of the season.
Absolutely. And so, I'm not ready to write off Tyler Buchner after 2 games because when they actually ran the offense that he's good at running, he was very successful. When they forced him to be a pocket passer, he wasn't as successful. It just seems very obvious to me the way that you need to use Tyler Buchner, and they weren't using him in that fashion. And I was hoping that they would continue going down that road, and they didn't in that game. So that's fine, and that's great. So we'll see what happens. We got to wait until September of next year now.
JS Sports responds, arm strength, yes. Runability, yes. Has shown no consistent ability to be accurate, make good decisions, look past his first option. Again, that's goes to the stuff that we're talking about, lack of experience and lack of recognition right now. Now, you can question because he had the whole offseason to prepare and get, is he capable, of making those reads? I have to think that with a year, again, a year of experience, he was going to get better at making those decisions. I don't know what that was going to look like this year, but you would have to think that by next year, it would, that was something that Brady Quinn, even, by the time that he was a junior and senior playing for Charlie Weiss, when he was breaking all the records at the end, he still had some of those issues, a little beat behind sometimes, coming off the first read. If you're not coming off the first read, again, it's more likely about the fact that he's just not quite confident enough yet because he hasn't done it enough yet. He doesn't have the reps and experience enough yet. And it's like, okay, this is the first read. Boom. That's where I'm going to go to rather than have the confidence to go on to the second and third reads. That's just, it's like things get sped up too much in your head and you want to get rid of it.
And that comes with experience. That comes with playing the game. I mean, you can practice it all you want. And he did go through his reads plenty in the scrimmages and in practice and all of those different things. I saw it with my own eyes. He can do that, but it's different when you get into the game. You're the starting quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. It's just different. So he's, like I said, he's essentially a freshman quarterback, a first-year starter. You have to give him some time to develop. And he got zero help from his friends. That's the bigger problem, right? And I said this last week, and I'll say it again. You can bang Tommy Rees for the game plan or Marcus Freeman all you want. Those are accurate. That's accurate, right?
Yes.
I don't care what the game plan was. You still should have beat Marshall.
Right.
Okay. They didn't execute. They were better man to man across the board.
Should have been.
Doesn't matter. You have to play better than that. I mean,
yes.
So again, he got no help from the offensive line.
When you can't run the ball against Marshall,
he barely had time to throw the ball.
Yeah.
In this game, he threw long to, and that was because he got hit in the chest. If he had an extra split second, I think he hits that throw, right? He has to throw it early. So all of these different things. A freshman quarterback needs help from his offensive counterparts, and he wasn't getting it. So that's part of it as well. But again, game plan, you still should have beat Marshall.
Absolutely. There is no excuse. Marcus Freeman's 0-3 now for his career. Obviously 0-2 this year. First Notre Dame coach, though, to ever lose his first 3 games. And this is a situation, especially after all the love in the offseason and everything else, none of us thought we were going to be here. At worst, I think we were thinking 1-1 at this point, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Again, nobody predicted, like, unless you're a Marshall fan or somebody within the program, that Marshall was going to come in here and win. I mean, they literally got paid $1.25 million to come here and take an L, and they didn't. They took a win. So, yeah, 1-1 is absolutely the expectation. And then, you get over 500 this week, and then you start pressing forward and all of that. So it was completely surprising and totally expected that. Like, if you would have asked me, before the Fiesta Bowl, I'd be like, hey, worst case scenario, he's 1-2. It's a tough place to, it's a tough way to start, your first 3 games as a head coach, but he'll start racking up those wins as you move forward. This is not what was expected.
No. And it puts a lot more emphasis on what happens today and whether or not Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman, how long they'll be able to continue weathering the storm. Because, like, for the well, if Brian Kelly was here crowd, best case, they beat Marshall last week, and the other 2 games probably go, pretty close to the same route. You know what I mean? Like result,
Well, and that's a fair point. Somebody said, if Brian Kelly's here, that they would be 1-2. Well, yeah, they probably would be 1-2. They probably would have beaten Marshall, but they probably would have been blown out against Ohio State, and they probably would have been blown out in the Fiesta Bowl, if we're being honest, based on the track record. Now, Marcus Freeman has no track record. Right now, his track record is 0-3. Granted, right? But I do think that the outcome would have been different if, Brian Kelly would have won the game last week. I believe that. I believe he would have won that game last week.
I do too.
Yeah.
Vigo says Notre Dame paid Marshall $1.4 million to beat our bleeps. And, that's true, but Nebraska paid Georgia Southern and Texas A&M paid Appalachian State. And together, those 3 schools probably made around $6 million to go pick up wins on the road. So at least misery loves company. Notre Dame was not in that boat by themselves. That's right.
The highest ranked team to lose to a Sun Belt team.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And Cal is coming in here today. Let's be honest. Cal is a team that you put on the schedule because you can say, well, we played another Power 5 team and they'll come in here today and we can do our green jersey thing and have our fun and all that kind of stuff. You're expecting a win when you play Cal, but Notre Dame is 0-2. Cal is 2-0. Now, who they've played, now you can argue that UNLV and Marshall theoretically should be on the same level. Cal has beaten UC Davis and UNLV with Justin Wilcox. He's been around for a while now. I didn't realize how long Wilcox had been out there. 6th season now as the Golden Bears head coach, but they are 2-0 and they're averaging 27 points a game and they're allowing 13.5 points a game, which again, they haven't played in Ohio State, but both of those numbers are better than what Notre Dame has right now.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, there aren't many numbers that would be worse at this point, but that, I agree.
That's right.
2-0. They're undefeated. They haven't lost. So,
they are.
And I don't care who they played. They haven't lost.
They were 5-7 last year. They went 4-5 in the Pac-12. They've been 4-5 in the Pac-12 3 different times under Wilcox. That's the best they've finished in the conference. 7-6 in 2018, 8-5 in 2019 is his best 2 overall seasons. More importantly, I think for Cal, they have won 2 of their last 3 meetings with Stanford in the big game, and Notre Dame playing both of the participants in the big game this season within about a month of each other, with Stanford coming into Notre Dame Stadium next month. They had lost 9 straight to the Cardinal prior to that, and probably, if you're Cal, now you would like to see more wins, but as long as you're beating Stanford, Justin Wilcox probably has some pretty good job security right now.
Well, and again, I mean, Cal is not exactly a football powerhouse, right? And so the expectations and the bar is set a little bit differently at Cal than it is at other places. And that's understandable. And he's doing what he needs to do. And let's see what they bring to South Bend. I'm sure that Cal has all the confidence in the world right now coming into Notre Dame Stadium. Like, well, if Marshall can beat them, let's go. So I'm sure they got a ton of confidence and they're going to play that way.
That's right. Take a quick Tyler Evans saying he's rocking with KU today. Let's go Jayhawks. And you got that right. They're minus 9.5 at Houston, and they went on the road at Virginia. They were around 9.5, 10.5 points, I think, maybe even more than that at West Virginia last week. They won outright. They've got the number 4 scoring offense in the nation. So if you're looking from if you're in a state where you can legally bet, I like Kansas plus 9.5, and I like the over on that game as well at Houston today. So nice. Tyler Evans, very smart. So there's a tip for you.
Where's the bell?
That's right. That's right.
Tips. You're just making people money, Stiers.
Boom. I hope so. I hope I'm making myself some money on that one as a Kansas alum today. Jack Plummer, though, we're going to see this guy for the second year in a row here at Notre Dame Stadium. Played at Purdue last year. He transfers out to Cal. He is 51 of 74 for 546 yards, completed 69% of his passes, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was 25 of 36 for 187 last year, sacked once, threw a touchdown, no picks. Not the most mobile quarterback, and he has been sacked 6 times through 2 games so far this season, Vince. 4 last week against UNLV.
Well, and the vaunted UNLV pass rush, I'm hoping that and I say that with sarcasm, but at the same time, Notre Dame hasn't really shown much from their pass rush. So this is an opportunity for them to maybe make a statement. That would be great. Let's make a statement defensively.
Big chance.
Let's put Cal on their backside a little bit. We've had, I think, 1 sack a game or something along those lines. I mean, it's clearly not enough. Isaiah Foskey has been an afterthought. Jason Adamalola has been an afterthought. And as Brian likes to say, it's time for the stars to be stars. And so if UNLV can put Cal on their backs 4 times, I'm hoping that Notre Dame can at least get a couple. You would
think so. This seems like a big opportunity. This seems like a big opportunity for Notre Dame's defense today.
Absolutely. 100%. So let's go have some fun defense. Let's fly around the field and let's not give up a 94+ yard drive at the end of the game. How about that?
That's right. Vigo, yes, I did go to Kansas. I'm actually from Kansas. I spent most of my young life, the 70s and 80s, living in the state of Kansas. That's where my mom was from originally. And so went to the University of Kansas, and my sister went to Kansas State University. So we went to rival schools. But yes, Rock Chalk.
Does that ever come up? Does that ever come up with the rival school thing? Do you guys?
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about that is the University of Kansas is in Lawrence, Kansas. Mm-hmm. Kansas State University is in Manhattan, Kansas.
Right.
And we lived in Manhattan for 5 years when I was young, and I was more a Wildcat fan back then, and my sister was a Jayhawk fan. But what happened was she was a basketball player, college basketball player. She ended up getting a scholarship, played basketball at Kansas State, where she finished in the top 5 in both scoring and rebounding in her career before she left there. So she ended up, even though, so she was a Jayhawk fan living in Manhattan when we were growing up. She went to Kansas State. I went into the Army for 4 years after high school, came back. I went to the University of Kansas, even though I was a K-State fan growing up. So it was
crazy,
kind of odd. That's right.
Crazy.
That's right. How did I end up a Notre Dame fan with the Kansas background? My grandfather on my dad's side, Irish Catholic, and the whole thing. And so that's kind of where it came from, the Irish Catholic background. And was also, like, back in the 70s, there wasn't the NBC contract and all that stuff, but Notre Dame was still Notre Dame. And, it was, the typical, you're a Catholic living in Kansas. That was especially with Kansas and Kansas State not being any good at all in football. And I did not like either Nebraska or Oklahoma. And, so Notre Dame, they kind of became my college team way back when. And that's how that happened. And I've lived here, as you know, for 22 years now.
Boom.
Getting to cover Notre Dame and doing different play-by-play and stuff like that. So that's enough on me.
There's the background.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, but to what you were saying, I think this is a big opportunity for Notre Dame's defense. Get
Yes.
after Jack Plummer. Not a really good offensive line. If you can get sacked 4 times by UNLV, Notre Dame should be able to get to him today. Really, really need to see that happen. Make him have to make some bad decisions
Right.
because he is not a very mobile quarterback. And again, the offensive line is not that great. What's interesting watching their game, some of their game last week, and Jesse brought this up, and going back and looking, when they line up in the shotgun, they're going to throw the ball probably 95% of the time. When Plummer comes up under center, they're going to run the ball probably 95% of the time. So that's at least the tell that they had last week, unless they were just doing that, to maybe try to throw Notre Dame off this week as they scouted. I don't know what UC Davis looked like, but that's at least what they were showing last week. It seems like a pretty easy tell, if that's how you're doing it. So I'll be curious to see if that continues this afternoon at Notre Dame Stadium.
That is a terrible tell. Like, if that is your offense, then that is not a college level offense by any stretch of the imagination. So that is something I'm going to be keeping my eye on during the game to see if that holds. Because if it does, I mean, Notre Dame just needs to tee off and just go to town. I mean, that's such an obvious tell. So yeah, that is going to be very interesting. And then also, if they just do the complete opposite today, based on what they did last week too, would be a pretty big tell as well. So, but yeah, great opportunity for Notre Dame's defense for sure. This offense has been the weak part of the Cal team for quite a while, to be honest. And, Notre Dame's defense has an opportunity to really kind of get some things in motion and do some things that they want to do. And, we've seen the middle of this defense just weak against the run. And I know we're going to talk about the run game here in a second for Cal, but I mean, how do you not watch the first 2 games and think, hey, we can just go right up the middle on these guys and get yards?
You'd have to think so. Have to think so because they've got a pretty good young running back, Jaden Ott. He's been the Pac-12 Freshman of the Week both weeks so far. He is the first freshman to ever do that, to win it in consecutive weeks to start off a season. Against UNLV last week, 7 carries for 52 yards and had a career-high 3 receptions as well, scored 2 total touchdowns. In week 1 against UC Davis, he topped the century mark on 17 carries, and then had a couple receptions as well for 26 yards. So he is a multi-threat kind of guy. But again, like if they show their hand that much in terms of formation with what they are doing, that seems like it should be a relatively easy fix. But again, we'll see if that actually continues today.
We'll see if that trend holds. But again, even if it doesn't, I still feel like this is a great opportunity for the Notre Dame defense.
Yeah. Jeremiah Hunter and J. Michael Sturdivant, their 2 top receivers, they have combined for 21 catches and 261 yards so far. And if you took Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame's offense, where would the pass game production be right now? But yeah, so again, they've got some threats, but the offensive line is suspect. If Cal is able to run the ball effectively, though, that's what's going to keep them in this game. Notre Dame has to be able to shut that down today.
If they're able to run the ball effectively, I mean, Notre Dame needs to just go back to the drawing board defensively. There is no reason that Notre Dame shouldn't be able to shut down this run game for Cal. I'm not worried about the pass game. They're going to be a run-first team. Plummer can throw the ball around, don't get me wrong, but I have faith in the Notre Dame secondary. They're going to be able to neutralize that. It all comes down to the run game in the trenches, and I know that is cliche to say that the game's going to come down to the trenches, but Notre Dame needs to dominate with their front 7 against this offensive line. They absolutely need to. They need to get in the backfield. They need to get, tackles for loss, and they need to get a turnover. We're going to be this is our 3rd game into the season and have yet to force a turnover. Like that's a huge problem with this quote unquote ball hawking defense, right? And then they practice turnovers and they practice creating turnovers and all of these different things. I haven't seen it, and frankly, Notre Dame hasn't really been close to creating any turnovers. So they
No.
need to create. One of the people in the chat, and I apologize for not remembering who it is. Oh, there it is. It's Adam. He says the defense needs to get on the board with a turnover today.
Big
Could
time.
not agree more. I mean,
Big time.
you have to. You're going on the road next week to North Carolina, or next game to North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. You need to create a turnover and get some positive momentum defensively if you have any prayer of going into North Carolina and slowing down that offense.
And they only have like 2 pass breakups, I think, at this point,
right,
as well. And it's just so they have not been close to coming up with anything. And Al Golden, we're going to be able to talk to the coordinators every Tuesday going forward throughout the season. And Golden and Tommy Reese both came out this Tuesday, and Al Golden was, frustrated with the fact that hasn't happened, because they did spend time on that during the individual drills during training camp. Offensive guys were working on ball security. Defensive guys were working on ball disruption. Fortunately, besides the interceptions that we saw, those are the first turnovers that Notre Dame had, the interceptions last week. But defense just really has not come close to anything. But like, you look at a guy, again, like when you look at Isaiah Foskey and how this matchup should favor a guy with his skill, he forced 6 fumbles last year. A lot of strip sacks that he had last year. So if he can get to the quarterback, I think we see some of that finally today.
Yeah, absolutely. And he needs to come out of his shell or wherever he's been hiding the last 2 weeks, and he needs to make a mark on this defense. He's arguably your best defensive player.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, coming into the season, he
should
was your best defensive player.
Yeah.
Right? And he needs to play like it. What was the line from Rudy? You're a captain on this team and an All-American. Act like it.
Right.
He needs to act like it. He needs to show on the field that he is that guy.
Right.
So that's what I need to see.
Yep. Cal's defense is very unique in how they operate. They'll only have sometimes 2 down linemen at times. One of them is the nose guard, 6'4", 335-pound Ricky Correa. Sometimes they'll have 3 down linemen. But whether it's 2 or 3, they've got a lot of guys standing up with just those 2 to 3 down linemen. So what kind of challenges do you think that poses for Notre Dame today, Vince?
Well, it poses a challenge to what we think that they've been doing the most poor up to this point, is the communication piece of it. Because
exactly.
When you've got guys down, you've got guys up, you never know where the pressure is going to be coming from.
Yep.
You have to be able to communicate with the guy next to you when it comes to combo blocks, when it comes to blitz pickups, when it comes to stunt pickups. You have to be able to communicate. You can't turn your shoulders, away from the line of scrimmage. You can't go perpendicular to the line of scrimmage. You have to stay parallel, because if you go perpendicular, that not only does it make you skinnier, but it allows holes to the quarterback. You can't have that. So you've got to stay parallel. You've got to communicate, whether it's physical communication when it's come to combos and climbs, or whether it's verbal communication, me, you, stay, go, whatever it happens to be. These guys have to communicate. If their communication hasn't gotten any better from the first 2 weeks, and Cal's going to pose some issues for Notre Dame's offensive line, no doubt about it. And Cal's defense is their strength. I mean, that's what they do the best.
Right.
And part of that is because they confuse offensive linemen. So they need to communicate, man. That is by far the most important thing today.
Well, and you throw in the fact that you've got a first-time starter at quarterback who only has 5 games of experience, to his credit, a handful of snaps in those games. Yeah, and it's going to be a real challenge. And how Notre Dame responds to that. Again, like Jesse and I were talking the other day, and again, based on the way Notre Dame's offensive line has performed so far and what Cal is able to do inside to cause that kind of disruption, I think a lot more stuff on the perimeter is warranted. And to me, again, I know that a lot of people have been beating the Chris Tyree drum, but I think it is more relevant now than ever.
Yeah.
Chris Tyree has the skill set that can let you be successful. The runs don't have to be perfect, or, the blocking doesn't have to be perfect with Chris Tyree. If you can get him out either in space, whether it's a screen pass, a wheel route, any of those different things coming out of the backfield, or run plays outside, Chris Tyree is the guy who is much more capable of winning those battles with the ball in his hand. I think attacking the perimeter is where Notre Dame is really going to need to make its hay today against Cal.
Well, I mean, look, I'm packing the box, right? If I'm Cal, somebody said they're going to put 8 in the box. I agree. You stop Notre Dame's run game, they haven't proven that they can throw the ball. And when you've got a first-time starter at quarterback, why would you not do that? Make him beat you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I think that is going to be the key for Cal, and it's going to be the key for Notre Dame. Maybe, just maybe, we see a couple screen passes, this week. I mean, that would be a novel idea.
What's that, Vince? I don't know. What's a screen pass?
I know. But, a screen pass to Chris Tyree where he gets the ball in space. I mean, look, I want to be as respectful as possible, right? But there seems to be some very obvious things you can do with this offense to negate putting 8 guys in the box.
Right.
Getting the wide receivers involved, some tunnel screens, some bubble screens, some running back screens, some tight end screens. That's fine if you want to do that. Just don't throw it to Bauman because he's slower than you and me. But tight end screen to Michael Mayer, that's fine. Let's do that. Or how about a tight end screen to one of the freshmen who do have wheels and hands? That's always something that you could do. But those guys got to get on the field first. So there's a lot of things you can do offensively that I think can stymie the Cal defense.
Things like some of that jet sweep motion and things like that, or just pre-snap motion as well, I think can really help out Drew Pine. Just to, again, help an inexperienced quarterback recognize, is it man-to-man?
Right.
Is it zone? Because that's something he needs to know, obviously. Just
sure.
Put a man in motion so that he can see how Cal's defense reacts to that. There's a lot of different, and again, like Braden Lindsey on contested throws has, not been your guy. But there are different things that you can do with a guy with Braden Lindsey's speed, either to get him that, whether it's handing him the ball, shorter pass, some of that different stuff.
Sure.
There are just so many different things that they can do with this that they haven't necessarily tapped into yet.
Yeah, completely agree. And they've been, for lack of a better term, they've just been too vanilla for me offensively.
Yeah.
They need to expand things out a little bit. And again, I know that can be complicated with a first-year starter, or a first-game starter, but Drew Pine has been in this offense for 3 years, okay, or 2+ years. This is his 3rd year in the offense. I think he's got the playbook down. That's one thing Drew Pine has going for him, is that he's a very smart kid, and he understands the offense, right? This is his 3rd year in the offense. I think that you can go into this game with a little bit more of a wide-open playbook than you would if Steve Angeli was going to be the quarterback who's been in this offense for 6 months, right? So I think that is a plus for Drew Pine coming into this game. He has the most experience of any quarterback on the roster as far as time in the program.
No, exactly. And, again, like, does Tommy Rees dramatically change this up? I don't even know what you would call the offense they were running with Tyler Buchner. I've said this before. I feel like, to an extent, the way they were, he ended up, I think, with 13 carries last week, but a lot of those kind of came as the game went on. It was basically like, okay, we've got to move the ball now. So now we're going to let Buchner run the football a little bit, those kind of things. It to me, it almost felt like they had been trying to protect him from what ultimately happened because of the fact that he has been a little bit injury prone. And maybe you were concerned about that like they wanted to run him as little as possible. But last week, when they had to move the ball, they went to some more RPO type stuff. They went to some tempo. They ran him a little bit, that, and then ultimately what happened. Do you think that the offense, not that Drew Pine is going to be a big runner, but do you think that the offense for Drew Pine maybe looks a little bit more like it did when Notre Dame was having some success last week?
It has possibilities of looking similar, but it won't be to the extent of Drew running the ball.
Right. Again.
And that's the difference. Now, I don't mind getting Drew outside the pocket, rolling the coverage, that kind of a thing. I don't mind that. That's what got Tyler going last week. It was him running the ball. It was running the RPOs. And just as a reminder, because we talked about this a lot last year when Jack Cohn was the quarterback, an RPO doesn't mean that the quarterback is running the football. That means he has the option to hand it off or to
Run
throw
play.
the ball.
Right. Pass play.
Run, pass option, not run QB pass option.
Exactly.
RPO.
That's more zone read.
Correct.
When you're talking about whether or not the
Yes.
quarterback is an option to run.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish I had a nickel for every time they're like, hey, they're not. You can't run RPOs with a mobile quarterback. Yeah, you can, and they will. But I think that can be a very beneficial part of the offense if they do that with Drew. Because he is 6 foot tall, right? He's not going to be able to just stand in the pocket and pick apart teams.
But
I don't think that's his game.
He also does have the ability, if you did run, some of the zone read, to legitimately pull the ball. Not like Jack Cohn, who was never going to pull the ball last year. Again, he's not a blazer like Tyler Buckner, but he is more mobile. He can, he can at least be a threat from time to time.
Absolutely. He can absolutely be the threat. You're going to have to account for him. I mean, he's not going to be as dynamic of a runner as like an Ian Book, for example, or a Tyler Buckner. But at the same time, he can be a threat to get 8 to 15 yards, 5 yards, whatever, if you're not going to respect the quarterback on the zone read, right? So he does have that in his arsenal. So we'll see.
Yeah. So do you think if you had to bet, are you betting it's going to be a tempo offense predominantly today?
So when it comes to betting with Notre Dame,
I guess maybe that's not a good choice right now.
Last week, so
I know.
I will say
a lot of people
I'm hoping that it is a tempo offense because I think that will maximize Drew Pine's abilities both mentally and physically. I think a tempo offense can be very good.
Right. What's your biggest concern with Drew Pine?
His accuracy. I mean, that's my biggest concern right now. He's not the most accurate quarterback in the world. He
might leave it high and sail it right into a safety's hands.
Yes,
basically.
that's what worries me the most. He can throw the long ball. Tyler has a better long ball than Drew does, and I know people are going to push back on that based on what they've seen over the last 2 weeks, but Tyler throws a better long ball than Drew. So, are they going to be able to stretch the field with Drew? That's a question I would have going into it. I hope he proves me wrong, but his accuracy in the deep ball, I think, would be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And that exactly. My arm
Somebody
strength.
saying arm strength.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely. He is more Tommy Rees, than he is other guys. Like
right.
I feel like Tommy Rees is going to identify with Drew Pine a little bit.
Yeah. And I've seen,
willing to take chances, writing checks that his arm may not be able to cash, stuff like that. That's very Tommy Rees-ish, so is Drew Pine that guy? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And, I've seen some people say Ian Book 2.0, but the difference being, I think there's a bigger chance for some turnovers with Drew Pine than there was with Ian Book, because Ian Book, as we've seen before, would just eat the ball rather than throwing an interception.
And look, Drew's going to throw the ball. I mean, he'll try to squeeze it into tight places, and he'll do some of the things that we were banging on Ian Book for not doing, but then that also leads to potential turnovers. So you kind of have to balance that, right? I mean, we were begging Ian Book to throw the ball more, not run out of bounds and take a sack. Drew's not going to do that, I don't think. I think he's going to throw the ball, but, with that comes the possibility for turning the ball over.
Yep. Notre Dame's offense right now is averaging just 4.9 yards per play, 3.1 yards per carry. They rank 117th in the nation scoring offense, 15.5 points a game. Now, again, part of that is who you play and stuff like that. Sure. You still should have scored more against Marshall last week, though.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Buckner right now is the team's leading rusher with 62 yards through games. Estime is next with 54, and Andrick is only averaging 2.8 per carry. So I'm just gonna open up this can of worms and we'll go wherever it goes. I mean, I know where it's gonna go, but let's just talk about what they need to do to finally get this offense kickstarted, regardless of who the quarterback is. But it is going to be Drew Pine. What do they have to do to get this offense kickstarted today against a good Cal defense?
Honestly, I think it comes down to one thing: the offensive line. The offensive line needs to step up. They need to play better. I mean, they need to fire off the ball, keep their feet moving. They got to communicate better. They have to finish blocks. All of those different things. They need to be fundamentally sound. If they can do all of that, automatically the run game gets going. Okay, so now if the run game gets going, now Cal has to focus on that. That opens up the pass game, right? I think it all starts with the offensive line. And then if we're talking about the pass game, right? How about we keep some rushers off of the quarterback? That would be a great start to help with the pass game as well. I mean, Tyler Butner was running for his life a lot of times, or he was taking sacks, or he was getting hit while he was throwing, all of those different things that everybody was blaming Tyler for. How about we keep him a clean pocket and let him go through his reads and all of those different things? Drew Pine is not as mobile as Tyler is. You're going to have to keep guys off of Drew, right? So
Yes.
do you need to move the pocket around? Do you need, those are all the different things that need to happen. I think it all starts and finishes with the offensive line.
I agree that it starts with the offensive line, but it also is, what everyone else can see. But for some reason, Tommy Rees and the coaching staff has not been able to see so far is
Right.
why you don't include Chris Tyree more in the game plan. When you look at how things have gone so far, like when he has the ball in his hands, he has been the best runner of the football, and he obviously has the most speed of anyone in the football. And like, there's a lot of things to like about Audric Estime, and this is not, a slight on Audric Estime, but for Estime to be successful, he needs the line to be better right now. There needs to be a crease. There needs to be a hole for him to get that up there through. Chris Tyree can make things happen when things are not perfect because of the combination of his speed, his shiftiness, and all those different things. You just, bottom line, you need more Chris Tyree out there.
No doubt. Oh, absolutely.
Or with the ball in his hands, because he's been out there a lot. He just hasn't got the ball in his hands enough.
You need, like, Chris Tyree is the number one. Then there's a little bit of a gap. Then you need Tobias Merriweather out there. You need to get, the other wide receivers more involved, and this, look, we haven't brought up Chancey Stuckey and his group yet, right? And I think this is probably a good place to do that. I haven't seen the development from the wide receiver group either. And that's been very disappointing to me. Based on what I saw at practice, it has not translated to the game field yet.
Right.
That's a huge problem. The releases, for example, we talked about this throughout the week, the release of Braden Lindsey on a deep ball, right? He releases outside, no move to the inside to get the corner to come inside, give him more room to the outside. He's going right up that sideline. That makes that a really hard throw to make. And that's why he got thrown out of bounds on that one play. It was a great catch, but he was 2 feet out of bounds. If he rides that corner into the playing field a little bit more, he's got more room to work with. That's a completion, different game, right? So we need to see more development from the wide receiver group as well that we have not seen up to this point.
No, for sure. And, the Tobias Merriweather thing is still a question as well. And, they've talked about the fact that they need to have more confidence in him in those kind of things. And, look, it's something that we've heard a lot when it comes to freshman wide receivers. The bottom line is they are a depleted group, a group that is not producing the way it should be right now. How much you put on the offensive coordinator, how much you put on the guy who was the quarterback, there's different blame to go around. But the bottom line is Tobias Merriweather has a skill set, a combination skill set that they need on this team, especially like when you look at some mismatches they'll have with Cal with an inexperienced quarterback. The fact that he doesn't know the entire offense should not matter at this point, because I keep going back. There's a quarterback who played with Golden Tate that I've talked to quite a bit about how they got Golden Tate on the field. Golden Tate didn't know the entire offense when he was a freshman, and for part of the time when he was a sophomore either. What they would do, they would they would get Golden Tate on the field for a certain amount of plays per game, and when they did, they would always line him up on closest to the Notre Dame sideline, so that when he lined up, they could just say, "Golden, here's what you're doing." It was just that simple. Because he had speed, he had a skill set that nobody else on that roster had. And it's really just that simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated, and it can be 15 to 20 plays or, 12 to 15, whatever it happens to be. You can get him on the field if you want to get him on the field. And we all know that he's got the kind of skill set that can help this team and the quarterback right now.
Oh, no doubt about it. They need to get some of these young guys involved. I mean, people will call this a lost season. Well, I mean, if lost season means you're not playing for a national championship anymore, then okay. I mean, I get where you're coming from. It's time to play some other guys. It's time to see what these other guys can do. And there's no better time to do that than when you're at home against what was perceived in the preseason to be a lesser opponent. We'll see what happens on the field. I don't want to make any kind of assumptions at this point, but this is a great opportunity to get some other guys on the field, period. With some of those younger guys.
Sean S. threw in a super chat. Any word on Xavier Watts' progress on offense? Not necessarily any word, but, again, for a guy they moved over there to help out this receiving core, I don't think we've seen him at all offensively yet, right? The snaps that he's taken have all been defensive so far.
Yep, they've all been on defense, and which is surprising to me a little bit because he was practicing exclusively with the offense when we were there. That could have been a smokescreen, could have been whatever, but he was exclusively with the offense when we were there. And so I was anticipating seeing him get some snaps on offense, and that has not been the case up to this point. It's been all defense for Xavier Watts. And that's very disappointing. I was really hoping to see him on offense. I think he can do some of the things that we've been talking about with Chris Tyree. I think Xavier Watts can do a lot of those things in space as well.
Yeah.
They haven't gone that route, which is disappointing.
I think so too. You've mentioned the offensive line. There's a lot that needs cleaning up, on both sides of the ball. Execution is the key word that Marcus Freeman used earlier this week. And, not the kind that Brian Kelly made the bad joke about last year, but, executing on any given play. And, so Thursday it came up. He discussed how they've gone about trying to clean some things up in practice this week. And I'll read a couple quotes that Marcus Freeman had on this subject. Got a sip of my water there first because a couple of these are long. Quote, what I've been really trying to focus on is, hold on, let's make sure we look at every position on every play and are we executing our assignment or not? If there's confusion, what do we have to do to correct that? That could be coaching it better. That could be taking the play out. That could be changing something within the scheme. What I've been doing and what we've been doing is really trying to focus on practice in the past 2 games with a really critical eye. Not looking at the outcome, not looking at it, was the player successful or not, but really looking at each player on the field at that time and was he getting his job done or was he not? And not overlooking that if we need to stop practice to correct mistakes. If we need to take something out of the scheme, take it out. But let's give our guys a chance to truly have success because they know exactly what they're doing on every single play. End quote from Marcus Freeman. So what do you think about that, Vince?
It sounds like they're going back to basics and they're going back to, okay, this is who we want to be, but maybe this is who we are. And I think that is some smart reflection on the head coach's part, maybe the whole staff, but they're saying, hey, okay, we went into the season with an idea of who we wanted to be, who we wanted this team to be. Well, maybe we can't live up to that just yet. So who are we right now? What do we do well? What can we do? What can we be successful with? And then let's build on that. And if we can't be successful with, let's cut it out. It's kind of going back to the basics, Sean, which frankly, I'm okay with. Do what you do best. It's like when I'm calling plays or I'm suggesting plays to an offensive coordinator in my younger days, and for example, we're running trap and we're just executing the crap out of trap over and over. We're getting 7-8 yards a carry. And he's like, well, we can't keep doing the same thing. Why not?
Make them stop you.
Yeah. I mean, if it's working, let's just keep doing what's working.
It's the same thing, like you and I have both coached baseball. It's the same thing like when you're calling pitches. It's like if a guy is overmatched with a fastball, don't bother changing speeds and throw him a curveball or a changeup. Exactly. Keep feeding him what he can't hit.
Exactly. Just keep whatever works, keep doing that. And that's what I read between the lines here is he's saying we need to find out what we do well and we need to stick to that. And if we see mistakes, we're going to correct them on the spot, So, I mean, I like the idea. I like what he's saying here. Let's see if it proves to be, good during a game.
Well, I like what he's talking about. Again, what he's saying is, okay, not just go on, well, the play ended up working, so, something must have been right. You can still look at it critically and say, well, maybe their guy fell down, so that's part of why it succeeded. But I like the fact that they're saying, we can take some scheme away. We can take some things away from the playbook. In other words, narrow it down, basically doing what you're talking about right there, figuring out what we're actually good at and not just running a bunch of plays or a bunch of scheme to say that we're doing it, but narrowing it down and figuring out what they're actually good at. Do that as much as possible. You can run the same play out of multiple formations, for
Absolutely.
example. And if it works every time, you just keep doing it, like you said, until they stop you. So again, I'm curious to see what that looks like, especially from the offensive side of the ball, where it seems like Tommy Rees has just been running this. It's like he's got all these things in his head. Obviously, it seems like he's definitely been trying to do too much, and the focus really needed to narrow down with what he's calling and trying to use out there.
Absolutely. And it's almost like there are offensive coordinators out there, and I've worked with a few, at the high school level, where they're almost too smart for their own good, or they're trying to look smarter than they need to be, I guess is the best way to put it. Man, just narrow it down. Let's figure out what you do well and just do it. That's the key right now. And when you're 0-2 and you're trying to find some semblance of an offense, that's what you need to do. And so we said before that it appeared last year that Marcus Freeman was he was good at analyzing himself and adjusting throughout the season. He did it as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame.
Right.
I was hopeful that he would do that as the head coach at Notre Dame. This quote leads me to believe that he's going down that path.
And that's kind of, some of that came up at the Thursday press conference, going back to last year, after they had given up some explosive plays and given up a lot of points. And he said that as well, like, you couldn't get caught up in the result last year. Well, we're 2-0, so even though we gave up almost 70 points through 2 games, it doesn't matter. He said there were still a lot of things you could look at critically, and we did see his defense get better as the season went on, and we saw fewer of those explosive plays.
Well, and the other thing was last year, and I know that I'm harping on last year, but he went in front of the whole defense. He's like, hey, the call against Florida State, that was me. That was my bad. I made that mistake. He's willing to put it on him, and I think that having that, there's not a lot of coaches that are going to blame themselves in front of the team. And I think Marcus Freeman can do something like that and still keep the team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's important as well. And I don't know this for a fact, but he could have gone in front and be like, hey, my bad. I thought I was trying to make us into a team that we aren't yet. Let's go back and figure out who we are this week against Cal, and let's just go win a football game. You know what I mean? And again, that's me speculating. I don't know that actually happened, but I'm reading a lot into the quote that he had, and leads me to believe that's a possibility.
Yep. Well, and again, when you look at the defense now specifically, they've given up 90-plus yard touchdown drives in the fourth quarter in both games so far. So is that more distressing than those 30-plus yard explosives that we saw them giving up with Marcus Freeman's defense last year? I mean, both are bad, but
right, yeah, that's exactly right. The 90-yard drives, I think, are the worst for me because you have opportunities to correct and change, and one play is one play. You know what I mean? And the drives are just killers, man. It's the drives are more concerning to me as opposed to the one play. So I will say that, and that maybe that's not what people want to hear, but that's how I feel. You have opportunities to make plays. You have opportunities to correct, and they didn't. And that was concerning.
Yeah. And something else that came up this week a couple of different times with both Al Golden and with Marcus Freeman is the rotation of defensive players, because it's one thing if you're going to, like third series of the game, you work in 1 or 2 subs, you try to keep guys fresh, obviously. But when you see half a defensive unit out there that is a number 2 or number 3 guy, and then late in the game, like on that 3rd and 10, when you've got multiple backups out there, like when the game is on the line in the fourth quarter and you're at that point of the game, you play your reserves again in different spots. I still don't think you do it all together, but you play them in different spots, like in the second and third quarter, so that in the fourth quarter, your number 1 guys, the guys who are supposed to be your best players, are their most fresh and should be out there in the most important situations of the game.
Absolutely agree. You need your best when I use this phrase, maybe it's a bad phrase. When it's nut cutting time, you need to have your guys on the field, the guys that you trust, the starters. You start them for a reason, right? Those are the guys that you want on the field. I totally understand a rotation throughout the game, but when you're talking about the drive at the end, you need to have your guys in there. And if they can't handle it, then maybe they're not your guys. Maybe you need to find somebody else that can do it, right? But yeah, fully agree that you need to have your guys rested and ready to go for a drive that is so important like that in both games, frankly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vince, do you know what we've come to?
I know exactly what we've come to.
Rapid fire. Rapid fire.
Excited.
It is here. It is countdown rapid fire. Countdown to kickoff rapid fire time.
You got a lot of questions in here this week, man.
I know. I wasn't sure how many we would need, so I guess we'll see how far we go. I mean, there's a lot of things to be asking questions about, I guess, this week, So
that's fair.
Okay. Notre Dame's favored by 11.5. The over-under for this game is 40.5. Which way you going on those lines?
Right now, Notre Dame, to me, from a betting standpoint, is a friggin' enigma. Full disclosure, I have bet on every Notre Dame game for the last 2 years. I'm not touching this one because I just don't know. Now, for the purpose of this question, I will say that I'm going to take Cal plus the points and I'm going to take the under because I just don't trust. I just don't trust the offenses of either team at the moment. I just don't. I don't think Cal's offense is very good, and Notre Dame's offense hasn't shown me anything. So I'm taking the plus and I'm taking the under.
Yeah, 11.5, especially considering the anemic nature of Notre Dame's offense so far, it seems amazing that Notre Dame would be favored by 11.5 in this game. It's one of those Vegas head scratching things. This feels much more like a 6.5 point game than an 11.5 point game. So I like Cal plus the 11.5, but I like the over on this. My score prediction, slightly over, but will be over 40.5 points today. So I like Cal plus 11.5, but I like the over on 40.5.
It's funny. Total. I should actually look at my predictions to see if I even follow what the what the over unders and all of those different things are. I can't even remember what I predicted. But the bottom line is my faith in both offenses is waning at the moment. So we'll see.
Yeah. John Christophic says Notre Dame scored 21 last week. They did. Cal's defense is supposed to be better, though. And again, first-time quarterback and, all those different factors. They'll probably come out and end up scoring 35 points today. So, and again, it'll be like, what do any of us know?
Yeah. And my prediction has the under, by the way. So I guess I stayed consistent with myself.
Okay. Fill in the blank. The Drew Pine-led Irish offense will be blank today.
Jack Conish. I'll say that. I think it'll be Jack Conish. I think the offense needs to be, Jack Conish, second half of the season. I think they need to go tempo. I think they need to distribute the ball. They need to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. That's the only way I see this offense doing anything. So that's what I'm going to say.
We have multiple answers. Justin says vanilla. Yeah. John says awesome. And Brian says confused.
Well,
so, it
could be.
Could be a confusing vanilla awesome offense, right?
Here's my thing. So Brian J. Irish says confused. I think that the three of us up in the press box the last 2 weeks have been confused about
for sure.
So
for sure.
Maybe we're going to be confused. I don't know about the kids, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think it's going to have more energy today. I do think that there is going to be more risk reward to this offense because of the nature of Drew Pine. But again, if you look at some of the things that caused Tyler Buchner some problems, Drew Pine should have a little bit better handle. I mean, if we're to take him at what he says at face value, this guy is a film cruncher, he buries himself in that film room. Now, can he recognize zone versus man-to-man? Again, I think you put somebody in motion that you can help him out with that greatly to give him a better pre-snap feel, for what he is likely to see out there defensively. And if you keep him in a situation to give him 6, like Cone-esque I saw in the tempo. We should see that. I think we're going to see more energy. I think all it takes is Drew Pine hitting a couple plays early, and then we're going to see the Conor McGregor billionaire strut and the whole thing. That's right. I think that this offense not only, needs some guys to make plays, they need someone's energy they can feed off. And Tommy Rees said that earlier this week, that Drew Pine is a guy who can give this team, this offense, the right kind of energy they need, because you just haven't seen that from anybody so far. And the quarterback position, it starts from the quarterback on down. So I think that he can potentially give this offense a shot in the arm with the kind of energy that they need right now.
Well, and we've always said Drew has always been the vocal leader on this team. I mean, he just has been. And at practice, I mean, he's the guy that's high-fiving everybody and getting everybody fired up. I mean, that will translate to the field. And he's going to be doing that during the game when plays are made, right? And so he's going to be getting up in guys' faces and getting excited and celebrating and the whole thing. And I think fans are going to dig that. And I think the team will feed off of that, to your point. I think that's a really good point.
Yep. Which number will be greater today? Pine's total touchdowns or Tobias Merriweather's receptions?
I've got to go off of facts, right? Okay. I think Drew Pine's going to score some touchdowns today. I think he's going to throw a couple, maybe. We'll see. And they haven't played Tobias Merriweather a single snap. Right. As much as I want to say Tobias Merriweather, that's where I want to go with this. But if I want to be right, I've got to go with Drew Pine.
Yeah. And a couple people chiming in. I've got to go with Drew Pine for right now, because we all want to see Tobias Merriweather. And let's say Tobias gets on the field. I think best case scenario we're looking at is 2 to 3 catches, So you're looking at probably, if Notre Dame's offense is at least going to get to the end zone, you're probably looking at a push on that, because they did get their only touchdown pass that they've got so far with Drew Pine last week. Go ahead. You've got another point to make.
Yeah, here's a devil's advocate for you, Sean.
Okay.
So Drew has been the number 2 quarterback for 3-4 weeks at this point?
Right.
Tobias Merriweather's been running with the 2s.
Good point.
3 to 4 weeks.
Good thinking.
So maybe
like where your head's at.
Maybe they've got a connection. Maybe, Drew really trusts Tobias.
I like it. I like it. Maybe they match up. Maybe they match up.
I'm just saying, if it happens, I wouldn't be surprised. How about that?
I like it. I like it. I've got to go with Drew Pine right now, too, until we see, because we don't even know if Tobias is actually going to get on the field. We all want him to get on the field. We all think he should be on the field. But for right now, I've got to go with Drew Pine. I like that line of thinking.
We'll see. I hope so, because that would be so much fun.
And maybe that impacts their thinking. Like, hey, he's been working with Drew Pine. And maybe, who knows, maybe something happened in practice this week that they saw. Yeah. Who's going to have more total touches for the Irish today? Audric Estime, Michael Mayer, or Chris Tyree?
Again, going off of the first 2 games, I think you got to say Michael Mayer here. Now, I want it to be Chris Tyree. I want him to have the most touches. You know what? I'm going to be Mr. Positive on this one. I'm going with Chris Tyree. I think he gets the most touches.
Okay. Estime has 19 carries so far through 2 games.
0 catches, right?
0 catches.
Okay.
Chris Tyree, 9 carries, 3 receptions. So 12 total touches. Diggs has 11 carries so far. I just think that you need to pare down probably Logan Diggs right now. Yeah, and, like all these questions have been coming at Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees about why not more Chris Tyree. So again, he's out there all the time. They just haven't put the ball in his hands so far. He's actually got, quite a few reps with the offense through these first 2 games. I'm gonna think on the positive side as well. I'm gonna say that it is going to be Chris Tyree, because Michael Mayer, I think it is it 12 receptions or 13 receptions? Let me see if I've got that here real quick. It is 13 receptions, that he has. So that's, basically 6.5 per game. And that's right around what Tyree is averaging touches per game, 6 touches per game. So if he gets a bump up, he should easily be the leader today. So I'm going to go with Chris Tyree as well.
Come on, baby. Come on.
Scale of 1 to 10. How much do you agree with this? If Notre Dame has more sacks than Cal and wins the turnover battle today, they will win their first game of the season.
10. I mean, that's a 12. There, no doubt
Through the
about it.
roof. Through the roof.
If they finally get sacks and they get a turnover because they haven't got one all season, I mean, if they do all of that, I don't think it's a close game, to be honest with you. If they get, let's say they match UNLV in sacks, so they get 4, okay, and let's say they get 2 turnovers. I think Notre Dame wins by 3 touchdowns. So I think it would be a blowout at that point. I really do.
We've got 8s, we've got 10s, we've got 9s. I'm going to go 10 out of 10 as well, because I think that, like what we were talking about with Isaiah Foskey, one could go hand in hand with the other. If he gets to Jack Plummer today, I think that ball is coming out of Plummer's hands. Agreed. And it's going to lead to something big. So, that's what they've missed out on 2 very close games that they have played and lost. No disruptive plays, if I can spit it out, by the defense. That's what they've been waiting for. I think if they finally get it, it's going to be the difference in the game. So I'm going to go 10 as well.
Well, and don't you think Isaiah Foskey is going to be playing just ticked off at this point?
You would think.
He's got to play like a man possessed today. It was like, man, I have not shown up the last 2 games. He's got pride, right? I mean, he's got self-respect. He's not helping his team right now. All he's done is gotten 15-yard penalties. So, it's time, dude. It's time to see number 7 go nuts. He's got to be playing at another level. Has to be.
I agree. Fill in the blank. Manti Te'o coming back to Notre Dame this weekend is blank.
It's sweet. It's sweet. I mean, I'm a fan of that. I'm excited about, him being back on campus, and I'm really, really hoping that he gets a very positive reception, and I think that he will. There's still those idiot fans out there that think, whatever they need to think about the situation with Manti Te'o. But, when he was at Notre Dame, he was beloved. He was the captain. I mean, he was the heart and soul of this team. He deserves to be treated that way. He's an all-time great at Notre Dame, and I fully anticipate Notre Dame just wrapping their arms around him and just being awesome.
I think if you went most iconic Notre Dame players of the last 20 years, it's like Manti, Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija, Jalen Smith, maybe Quentin Nelson would fall in there as well. It's a short list.
Second in the Heisman Trophy balloting. I mean, that's saying something for a middle linebacker, So he's beloved, and he needs to continue to be that way at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's kind of like I think Stymie said it in the chat, perfect timing. And that's what it is with this, with the Netflix thing coming out. I guess it's been about a month ago now.
Sure.
At this point, and the groundswell of support for him, it definitely seems like a great time. His NFL career is over, so he's able to come back for something like this today. And I hope it works out pretty well. I'm curious sort of what the origin of this was. And he is I think he's going to walk from the Basilica. He's going to do the walk, I believe, with the team from the Basilica.
Nice.
And then he's supposed to come up into the press box after that and meet with the media as a group up there. So kind of curious to see, what kind of things he has to say, maybe why he came back and
he's got a family now, right? So I mean, he's got kids and all that. I mean, if I'm Manti Te'o, how do you not want to take your kids to Notre Dame and show them what was a huge part of your life, and when he was just an absolute icon of college football?
Absolutely.
You want to share that. You want to share that with your family and your kids when they're old enough to understand it. They're probably not old enough to completely understand it, but they're going to see their dad beloved, and all they know of that is their dad, So I'm excited for him. I think this is good timing, like Stymie said, and I hope it works out well.
After beating Notre Dame last week, there are already a few projections of Marshall to the Cotton Bowl this season. Do you buy or sell the Thundering Herd as this year's Cincinnati Bearcats?
I mean, is it possible? Sure, but I'm going to go ahead and reserve the right to say no on this one. It's a little early for me to project Marshall. I mean, the Sun Belt was on fire last week, and
they were.
They did not go to West Virginia. Their game day didn't go to West Virginia this week. They went to App State. They went to Boone, North Carolina. So they obviously think App State is a little bit better than Marshall. So I'm going to say no at the moment, but you know what? I hope that they prove me wrong. How about that?
The win over Notre Dame was Cincinnati's big resume last year, and Notre Dame's going to have to help Marshall a little bit for that win to mean anything.
That's a good point.
At this point, Notre Dame's going to have to get on a roll of its own now. They've got a stretch. You mentioned the Sun Belt being the thing with App State and Georgia Southern. We talked about it earlier, how they beat they won at Texas A&M and Nebraska last week as well. 3 teams in the Sun Belt all winning against Power 5 teams on the same day. But they've got a stretch where from late October and into early November, Coastal Carolina, App State, and Georgia Southern, they will play those teams in a 4-game stretch. And that's really going to be their season right there. How do they come out? They are home for all but the Georgia Southern game. So I think they've at least got they're not going to be a playoff team, but right. I do think if they can navigate that, they at least will have a chance to be that group of 5 team that ends up being in a New Year's Six bowl. So I'll sell for right now, because again, I think that is definitely going to be a tough stretch for them. Those 3 games, if they're able to navigate it, they'll at least end up in a New Year's Six bowl. They're not going to be a playoff team though.
Right. And they were I was watching game day this morning and before the show, and they were talking about, they had the Sun Belt commissioner on, and they asked him, how do you feel about the new 12-team playoff? And he's like, this is great for us. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to have a legitimate shot at winning a national championship. He's like, for sure. What's there not to like? For the Fun Belt to have an opportunity to get a team in that 12-team playoff. I mean, that's a great opportunity for the group of 5 schools. If they can take care of their business in the regular season, maybe get an upset here or there, jump into that top 12. What a great opportunity for them. So, that's what people don't necessarily look at. Now, do they have if they're in, they have a shot at winning a national title, and that's what we've always said about the Final Four. If you're in, you got a shot. You're playing for a national championship. If you're in the top 12, you're playing for a national championship. So that's a great opportunity for schools like that.
Yep. Last one, fill in the blank. Green jerseys Notre Dame is wearing today are blank.
The specific green jerseys that they are wearing, I'm not a huge fan of. And it's funny to me that they put the names on the back in white, when
I know
normally whatever your accent color is on the jersey, that's what the names are, right? But they put them in white. Why aren't the numbers white? That's my bit. If they make the numbers white, I think these would be clean. They'd be crisp. I'd be all about them, right?
I agree.
But the blue is just really tough. I'm going to have to make sure I put my binoculars, in the backpack today. But the blue, it's nice up close, I guess, maybe in pictures, but from far away, it doesn't really do it for me. I'd rather either go gold or white on the numbers.
I like the green. I've always been a big green jersey proponent. I wish I'd like to see them do it once a year. And before this happened, we might have been talking about it this summer. I said, you pick a game where it's basically what they ended up doing. You pick a game that's not necessarily a huge crowd draw, and you say, this is going to be the green jersey game. So you give people a little bit, different kind of excitement, and you do it in advance. So you're not doing the whole, like the Trojan horse and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly what they did. Now, I know there are still detractors, people don't like it, and the whole jinx and all that kind of stuff. I agree with what you said. I'm not a fan of these navy blue numbers on this green. I wish that it was just all white, kind of like you were talking about with the names. They took a picture. The white looks really good. And Alan says no names, I believe. Well, the jerseys that they tweeted out the other day had names on the back of the jerseys.
Right. And they were in white.
That's what we're all going on.
Yep. Absolutely. So we'll find out in a few hours. But.
Yep. Game prediction time, Vince. What's your prediction? Notre Dame Cal today.
I felt like I got burned last week, as I'm sure everybody felt. I picked Notre Dame to cover the spread. I picked it for the over. Yeah, none of that obviously happened. And so that was really tough for me. Drew Pine obviously is the quarterback this week. What does the offense look like? That is going to be a huge question mark going into this thing. And the defense is going to have to step up. This has to be a coming out party for the defense. The offense just needs to figure out who they are with Drew Pine at quarterback. I don't think they ever figured out who they were with Tyler Buckner at quarterback. So we'll see if they can figure that out in one game with Drew Pine. Again, I took the under of the 40.5 or whatever it was in the rapid fire. I have Notre Dame 23, Cal 10. I'm not like Notre Dame can score in the 20s. I think they could do that. And I'm not convinced Cal is going to be able to put enough points on the board to really do a whole lot to really challenge in this game. But at the same time, it's going to be closer than I think it should be. So
Yeah.
I'll take Notre Dame 23, Cal 10.
Yeah. I mean, this is the defense is still, they're still allowing just 23.5 points a game, which, like when you factor Ohio State into the mix, that is still a pretty solid number with room for improvement. And I think they can. The biggest question is just going to be, what's the offense going to be able to do today? What are they going to be able to do with Drew Pine? What are they going to be able to do against this unique Cal defense that, again, is going to have just 2 down linemen at times? Chris Tyree is the kind of guy who can attack this defense on the perimeter, and that's where I think they need to make their hay today, is out on the perimeter. We all want to see Tobias Merriweather as part of that mix, but that's kind of banking on a lot right now, considering what we've seen so far. But, again, Notre Dame's defense should be able to make its hay against an immobile quarterback and a not very good offensive line that gave up 4 sacks to UNLV last week. I have Notre Dame winning 26-17 today.
Okay.
So 43 total points.
Okay. I'm down with that. So we both got Notre Dame getting the victory, as I would hope that most people would have. But again, I can understand people being gun shy after last week. Totally.
Right. All right. You want to lead us through the rest of our games that we have now coming up today?
I certainly can. So, let's turn the page to some college football. Now, there are a few big games, and then there's a lot of games where the top teams are playing garbage teams. And until we get into conference play, I think we're going to have that, that is kind of par for the course, and that's kind of how it goes. But we did pick out a few games that we're going to kind of jet through and talk about here a little bit. So first game on the list is Miami at Texas A&M. So number 13, Miami travels to College Station to take on number 24, Texas A&M. Kickoff set for 9 o'clock on ESPN, which is kind of a weird start time, frankly, but hey, whatever.
Yeah.
So, why does this game matter? Texas A&M also coming off of a heartbreaking loss to App State, another Sun Belt team, so much so that game day is at Appalachian State.
They are.
And, this is Miami's first really big test of the year. I mean, they beat Southern Miss and they beat Bethune-Cookman.
Right.
Or Brett Favre isn't playing for Southern Miss anymore, so that's not exactly a huge win for Miami. So this is their first big test of the season. They're going on the road to College Station and to what I am assuming is going to be a pretty PO'd Texas A&M team after what happened last week.
After losing to App State. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Sean, your thoughts on this game going in?
Well, one, I don't think Texas A&M is all that good, and I don't really think we know what Miami is so far under Mario Cristobal, because the Cristobal bandwagon is open for business right now after those lopsided wins that you mentioned. And, the Aggies are looking for a bounce back. And, there's been all this midnight yell stuff going on down there. And there's been all this weird stuff going on at Texas A&M. I just don't think it's a very good offense. But again, what really is Miami? I think that there is there's kind of a big rush, to kind of throw Miami back into the national conversation, especially when, with Mario Cristobal down there. But I've got Texas A&M winning this game 24-20. They are favored by 6.5 in this game. Because it is in College Station, the over-under is 44.5. I like Texas A&M today.
Well, and, just for your Brian Kelly twist of this whole thing, the former LSU starting quarterback is going to get the start for Texas A&M this week. So they're changing quarterbacks in Aggie land, I believe. I think this is his first start of the season. So that'll make things a little bit interesting, trying to charge up this offense a little bit. I think the biggest question mark here is what is Miami? I don't think that they were really tested in the first 2 weeks. I guess I'm a fan of Mario Cristobal. I think he fits down there in Miami, but this is going to be his first opportunity to kind of prove it on the big stage. And he's going to have the stage somewhat to himself at 9:00 at night on ESPN. So that's going to be an interesting one. My question is, how is Texas A&M still ranked? I mean, that's kind of a big question mark for
that
me.
That is weird that they are still in the top 25 after losing to Appalachian State last week.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, whatever, they're 24. But at the same time,
just hanging on, I guess.
I guess I just don't see it. But, again, this is a huge test for Miami. Who are they? What are they? And can they do it on the road? I don't know that they're quite ready for that just yet. So I also have Texas A&M winning this game. I have it extremely low scoring. I've got A&M 17, Miami 13, because I do think the Texas A&M defense is pretty good. And so they're going to throw everything they've got at Miami in this one. I don't think Miami's really ready for the task. So A&M squeaks one out. All right. So we and I are on the same page on that one. Next up, number 22, Penn State Nittany Lions travel to Auburn to take on the Tigers. Kickoff set for 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Again, another first test situation for Auburn since they played Mercer and San Jose State,
yes,
so far this season. Bottom line is, they're great against the run. They proved that last year and so far this year, but again, against opponents that aren't very good. Penn State is going to have to win through the air because Auburn I think they're going to shut down Penn State's run game. So it's going to come down to, can Penn State do what they need to do in the pass game? That's kind of my analysis on this one. And the other thing is Penn State has been tested. They did go on the road to Purdue, and they got that road experience already. Auburn's coming into this thing completely untested. And so Penn State, again, with another road challenge going into Auburn. They're the ranked team in this one. I think Penn State gets it done. I got them 24-17 over Auburn. So I think the visitors go home victorious on this one. What say you, Sean Stiers?
Yeah, I like Penn State in this game as well. Like you mentioned the passing game, and Auburn has given up almost 240 passing yards a game to those two teams you were talking about, Mercer and San Jose State. I think probably the fact that you're talking about Penn State going to an SEC school like Auburn, and it's not a night game, it's afternoon, maybe helps out the visitors a little bit in this game. And again, it's, like Penn State running back Nicholas Singleton, 210 yards are impressive. He's averaging 10.5 yards a carry, so are they going to be able to translate that into success against Auburn? I think that you've got a guy with those kind of numbers because, again, Auburn's only allowed 128 yards and 2.1 per carry. But again, you're talking about Mercer and San Jose State. I think you're right. Penn State will have to succeed through the air. But when you've got a guy like Singleton who's run the ball the way he has so far, I think that helps. And I like Penn State on the road. They're actually favored by 2.5 in this game. I like them winning 21-17 on the road at Auburn.
All right. So you're in the neighborhood that I'm in. Okay. I can play with that. Okay. Next up on the slate, I think this is going to be a really interesting one, Sean. Again, it's going to be a night game because it is on the West Coast, but the Michigan State Spartans, number 11 in the country, are set to travel to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies. Again, 7:30 kickoff on ABC. This one, I'm going to let you kick this one off to see if you go the same route that I'm going to go. But I think this one is very intriguing for me, but I'll let you kind of lead this one off.
I think it's pretty intriguing as well, especially when you look at the fact that Michael Penix Jr., the former Indiana quarterback, is out there at Washington right now.
Yes.
Like I didn't realize that he had transferred until I kind of started looking at this game earlier this week when Brian sent us the games that we had to pick. I was like, wow, Penix is out there. That's really curious. And Michigan State has outscored a couple of MAC opponents 87-13 so far. I think that there is some question about just how good Michigan State is, because they are actually an underdog going out to Washington, even though they are ranked 11th in the country right now, and the Huskies are unranked going into this game. So what that means, well, Vegas obviously doesn't care about AP rankings, I guess. But Michigan State has a couple of running backs who've combined for 362 of the team's 457 rushing yards, and that's what they want to do. They want to be able, to line up and play big boy, smash mouth football and all that kind of stuff. And I think that ground game is going to travel for Michigan State. So I like them. I think that there are just enough questions about Washington, because again, like, what exactly is Washington? Who exactly is Washington? I like Michigan State in a game that I think is going to see some points, 34-28.
Okay. Well, our scores are very similar.
Okay.
So here's my thing. You brought up Michael Penix, and I think that is the key to this entire thing, right? He kind of had that magical season. I believe it was in 2019. You know who his offensive coordinator was then, Sean Stiers?
I don't.
Kalen DeBoer, the head coach at the University of Washington.
Oh, there's your tie-in, obviously.
There's
right there.
My tie-in. That is
very good
exactly
one.
Exactly right. And so when Coach DeBoer left to go to Fresno State, that's when Michael Penix took a step back and wasn't the Michael Penix that we saw in 2019, right?
Yeah.
And so he's kind of had a bit
of
a
resurgence.
It all makes
sense now. Yeah.
Yep. He's had a bit of a resurgence over there in Seattle with Washington. And I think that shows up in this game. This is the one I'm really looking forward to, actually. And we'll see where we're at with the post-game show. But I'm looking forward to watching this one. I think Michael Penix has another comeback, breakout type game. I've got Washington winning this one. I think they're going to win 31-27. I think it is going to be a bit of a high scoring, some fireworks, things like that. So, a little bit of Pac-12 after dark. I'm looking forward to this one, and it doesn't hurt that my father-in-law is a Michigan State fan, so I got to make sure I watch this one so that I could potentially rub it in his face, or I can say I was cheering for Michigan State all along. So, I think this is going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Penix can do.
Yeah, I am too. That could be a fun one for sure. And again, I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game.
All right, let's see here. This is the last game that we are going to talk about, Sean. BYU, they're number 12 BYU Cougars.
I know.
By the way, travel to Eugene to take on the number 25 Oregon Ducks. Kickoff set for 3:30 Eastern on Fox. So BYU is about a 3-point underdog going into this game, going into Eugene for this matchup. BYU has been on fire lately, and the win over top 10 Baylor was special, even if it was in overtime. This is going to be really, regardless of what you think about Notre Dame, this is going to be their last big test before they face Notre Dame in Vegas, right?
Right.
And so this is going to be a big opportunity for them to potentially get into the top 10, depending on what happens above them. So I think this is a huge game, for BYU, but it's going to be tough going on the road and win this game. But if they do, they're going to have to be themselves. They're going to have to win this game in the trenches and be the more physical team. If BYU wants to win this game against Oregon, they've got to punch Oregon in the mouth on the road, which is going to be very difficult to do. Oregon isn't the hardest place in the world to play, but it is still a difficult place to play going on the road. But I think BYU is going to travel very, very well. So, I will say Oregon has to bounce back from what they didn't really show up against Georgia. And then the next week they put 70 on Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
So, who is Oregon? I don't know that we even know the answer to that question. But this is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a close game. But I think BYU pulls it out. I think they pull it out on the road. I've got BYU winning 21-20 over Oregon.
I think it's going to be really close as well. And BYU, they've got a crazy schedule. They played, as you mentioned, Baylor last week. They're playing Oregon this week. They got Notre Dame coming up in the Shamrock Series game in a couple of weeks. They play Arkansas after that, and they play Stanford later in the season. So, they're still an independent right now before they go to the Big 12, but they were not afraid to schedule some teams this year. The biggest question I have is sort of how they respond after having to go to Waco and playing an overtime game last week. And now, not that it's that far to Oregon, but still, you're
Right.
on the road again this week. You're at Oregon. And like you said, I mean, Oregon blew the brakes off Eastern Washington, putting
Yes,
up
they
70
did.
points last
Yes, they
week.
did.
So they showed that they can score. BYU's got a deep threat, Puka Nakua, who
Ooh, look at
he's
you.
only played in one of the 2 games so far, 1 catch, but he's a guy who can get deep, who did make the trip up there to Eugene this week. I think that BYU is going to have to run winning the ball. I think that they can run winning the ball. I think that they can be more physical than Oregon in what's going to be the first meeting between these 2 teams since Ty Detmer won the Heisman back in
Woo!
1990. So BYU is a slight underdog, but I like their running game and their defense to ultimately win the day 27-24.
Oh, so you're kind of in the neighborhood that I am
Yep.
about being a tight game. Yeah, this is, obviously I keep my eye on, Notre Dame opponents and things like that. And you're thinking about, and again, a lot of this was from preseason and, you're wanting Notre Dame's strength of schedule to be really good. But look, if Notre Dame's going to win a bunch of games here, possibility, if they're going to win a bunch of games, you still need their strength of schedule to be good, right? You need Ohio State to be good. You need BYU to be good. You need USC to be good.
Right.
You need North Carolina to fix their defensive problems, right? You need these teams to be better to help out Notre Dame's strength of schedule so they get a better bowl game or what have you. So I've had my eye on BYU, and they're playing really, really well right now. And
Yeah, they are.
I think they can do it. I think they can go on the road. I think, like you said, it's their swan song of being an independent, but at the same time, they're not afraid to schedule top flight opponents and go in there and do their thing. I mean, they beat Baylor. I think they're going to beat Oregon. A lot of people think they're going to beat Notre Dame. That would be huge. If they can do all of that, they're looking very seriously at being in the college football playoff.
I mean, I think BYU was already looked at as probably the 4th toughest game. Some people might have even thought the third toughest game on Notre Dame's schedule, but they could end up being the 2nd toughest,
Yeah.
if they turn out to be what they could be based on that win over Baylor last week. It's not going to be a pushover game.
Right.
That's for sure for
Right.
Notre Dame. It's going to be very tough. And again, Notre Dame's got to figure some things out today.
Doubt.
Like, we've been talking about these teams. Who are some of these teams? Who is Notre Dame? We're going to see today, just exactly. I think we're going to find out a lot about Marcus Freeman as a head coach in today's game.
Big time.
Because, I think I originally might have had it as a rapid fire question and I didn't put it in there. This is absolutely a must win, I think, for Marcus Freeman today.
Oh, I think it absolutely is.
I don't think that we thought we were going to see a must win this early in his tenure, but this is a must win right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I completely agree with you. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I felt like, last week was a win, but I think this is a must win. Right. And I think that's
Right.
really important. And, it'll hold off the, not the boo birds necessarily, but, it'll hold people off for a little while. He needs to string together some wins here in order to restore some of the confidence. Like, I still have confidence. And we talked about this in our show, what was it, on Tuesday night, on whether Marcus Freeman was the right guy for the job at the time. I still think he was the right man for the job. I think he's the right man for the job moving forward. But now it's time to start instill, regaining some of that confidence. And I think that starts today. If you lose today, you've got a giant hole to dig yourself out of.
Yes. All the questions start becoming a lot different.
Absolutely.
If you lose today. And again, like coming into the season and coming into today, this is a team that you're supposed to beat. There's no doubt about that. You've got to win today.
No doubt. Could not agree more. And
Can't
hopefully that's what we see. And we are going to learn a lot about Marcus Freeman. And we're going to see if his words that we spoke, that the quotes that he gave are prophetic. And, he kind of attacks those words, and shows it on the field. Is he going to insist on being we've got to run the ball, we got to stop the run guy? Or is it going to be, hey, we need to figure out what we do best and go from there?
Right. Very good point. Again, my upset special today, Kansas plus 9.5. And I like the over on 58.5 there at Houston today. So
let's see. My upset pick, I've got Texas Tech over NC State. Okay, so I believe it is in Raleigh, but I've got Texas Tech going in and beating NC State. So that's my upset pick of the day. So we'll see what happens there.
All right, well, that's going to do it for IB Countdown to Kickoff. Another one in the books. This is my first full show on Saturday.
Great to have you back, Sean.
Jumping back in the saddle. Great to be back, Vince. Glad to have everybody with us today. Appreciate all the comments. As always, even if we don't always disagree, we always enjoy the discourse and being able to debate back and forth, as long as we can keep it civil, which I think most people do. I saw somebody got put in timeout for a little bit earlier.
True.
So
it's just like, hey, time to relax.
That's right.
Come back and play in 5 minutes.
That's right. Post-game show, of course, after the game. So hopefully Vince and Brian and Sean have more smiles on their faces today than they did last week.
I hope so.
All right. And you guys will also have
upon further review.
Upon further, I couldn't remember if it was after or upon. Upon further review Sunday, and of course, IB Nation Sports Talk. Vince and I will be here Monday as well. So we will talk to you then. We're going to wrap it up right now.